Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you optimization of images for web. I'm going to show you the importance of having both a root and images folder, and actually how to zip content for submission. So when it submits, anybody can open up the folder, and all the contents that are going to be within that website page comes over, as all of this applies to web design. So it's a short little video, but it should be very influential. The first thing we'll look at is this is a project that I had submitted by one of my students. And if you're noticing, it is zipped. It's called a Week 2 site. I have already unzipped it using my software. And I'm going to go ahead and go inside this folder and just take a look. Now, when I open up this folder, we're seeing a couple HTML pages. I'm seeing a photos folder, okay? I'm going to go back real quick. This folder right here is what I am implying as the root folder. Okay, this would be like your folder if it was on your computer, which was, we would also call this your local drive. Okay, your local folder. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this folder again, and we're looking at it. Now, when we're building web design and contents for layout in web design, the number one thing we have to remember is we want a index.html page. Okay. We do not want to have any kind of type that comes beforehand before it says index. Really what we want is we want it to be called simply just index. Okay? I'm going to explain this a little bit later, but right now we're just going to leave it all as is so I can kind of show you the purpose and the explanation of the why. So in Dreamweaver, let me go ahead and open up this page which represents the index. So I'm going to, in Dreamweaver, go to File, Open, and I'm going to open up this this dots and index. Okay. Now when I open it, here's what I'm seeing from my end. And noticing already, it comes over. Yeah, all the paragraph tags are there, the headings. You can see the body. That there's a heading. There's italic for the code. But if I scroll down to training, notice that all the images are not popping over. Well, we have a few issues here. So if I look at this first image and we look down here in my HTML code, we're noticing that it's trying to reach out to a folder that's called dots and images. Okay. And this is the image inside that folder it's trying to locate, this JPEG. It's the IMG underscore 4251. So if we look at the beginning part of this image source code, we're looking for the dots and images folder. Now I'm going to go back into the site, and we're noticing that inside the local directory file, our root folder that's local, we have two HTML pages. Yeah, we know this has to be this should be the index page, and I'm going to explain that here in a second. But we do not have a folder that's called dots and images. Instead, there is a folder here that I'm going to open it up. It's called photos. And inside there, these are all the photos that the student captured that's actually being used to be built into the website. But there's no folder actually called dots and images. Now, on web servers, there's never really a folder that's going to be called photos or anything that you're going to name. By default, you're going to have a folder that's called images. So I would really want to actually have this be called my images folder. Now, I'm going to show you that give you a little bit more clarity here in a second, but just bear with me. So this is now going to be called our images folder. So back in Dreamweaver, if I come down here into my code, and instead of dots and images, if I was to call this my images folder, right, it's going to, it's all going to come over converted. So let me delete that. And now, since I've deleted it, notice the update. So now it understands where to reach out to, but we got a few issues here. We're looking at this image. Look at how big it is. This is not at all optimized for web, right? So I could also come on down and I could change all the other locations to images, but right now let's focus on this image, and this is really, really important. So we're noticing that the magnitude of this image, it also does not have a width parameter on it, looking at it, but we'll kind of break this down a little bit further, okay? So I'm going to take image 4251 and I'm going to optimize this for web and give you a little bit of a run through on that. So I'm going to go into Photoshop here, and I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to go into that folder now, this Week 2 site. I'm going to go into my new folder that I've renamed Images, which now understands where to locate it. I'm going to track down 4251. We're going to open up this file. And looking at this image, now in Photoshop it looks good, but if I go to image, image size, look at the size of this. So we've got pixels, right? It's 72 res. Yeah, that's perfect for web. We don't want to have 300 DPI images for web. We want 72 to make it easy load times, but the width is 3168 and the height is 4752. Now I'm going to leave constraint proportions on, and now standard width for web design, back in the day it was 800. Nowadays they're even using 960 by default. So keep that in mind as far as width goes. It's kind of like PowerPoint. You ever heard of that old saying, 1024 by 768? Well, that applies to literally the pixel resolution for PowerPoint. So keep the 1024 768 in mind, and we know that we want to have a number kind of lower than those values. Now, if we're working by standard, which is 960, what I like to do is I'm going to take this number down to 500. And because the constraint proportions are already activated, notice that I went ahead and updated the height. So I'm going to click OK. Look at the size of the image in Photoshop, right? Now that is completely incorrect. What I would do from this point is go to View, and I'm going to go to Fit on Screen, and voila, we're back to square one. So really in Photoshop, it's just indicating that we've sized this down, but look at the actual width and height of the image now. So it's still working. Okay, it's still workable. It's even more workable to take it to a local store in your area and have it actually printed. Walmart or whatever other areas or retail stores that have that ability. All right. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to optimize this image. So I've already fixed the width and height on this. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to Save for Web. Okay, it's Alt-Shift-Control-S. And in this menu, now we're going to be coming into this menu here, the sub-menu, later in the course. Okay, but right now, what we want to focus on is looking at what the preset. We have a PNG. I like personally using PNGs, but for this lesson, let's stick with JPEG because they're easier to use and understand, especially for a fundamentals class. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit the drop-down tab. And we're going to go to JPEG High. And now noticing the JPEG high quality, or at quality of 60, that is a perfect number to work with, because what this is doing is going to optimize our images for web. It's going to compress it to kilobytes, which is exactly what we want, and it's going to help with that quick load time. So when we hit websites, they're not going to have that as false page loading times and be dragged out. So I'm going to hit Save, and then in my menu, I'm going to now go in to see how we're save optimized as. That is exactly what we want. That's what that implies. I'm going to go out to my, and I'm going to go back into that website folder, website 2 images now that I've renamed it. So we're going to maintain our original image. It's always wise to maintain the original that was captured, but we want to have an optimized image. So another thing, it's probably better to have an easier naming structure as applied to just using IMG 4251.2. In this case, what I would really want to name this as is, let's say, like real short dog 2. Notice when I name this for web purposes that it's all lowercase. If I had to do a space, I could do an underscore or a dash. Okay, but you never have caps when you're naming images for web or using any kind of web naming convention, because if I was to use FTP, which I'm going to show you here shortly, it sometimes can distort the signal, and it has a issue with the transfer process. So I'm going to use all lowercase. I'm just going to use a dash and name it dog2. Okay, this is a easier convention for naming. I'm avoiding the caps and I'm avoiding the number. I think I am going to stay with the user-friendly naming structure, so I don't run into any kind of problems. Just to maintain it on the direction for proper web design. I'm going to hit Save. Dog2, that's saved. Back in Dreamweaver, let's take a look now. So we know that it's going out to our images folder, and then the image is 4251. That's wrong. I'm going to change this to, dog2. Oh, I put the dash. It was a, wonder why it's not working. I put that dash in there. Dog2. There it is. Perfect. So you can also see just by that process, I had to go back and correct myself. I had the dash, but then I forgot to put the dash in. It has to be exact. It has to be right on the same exact naming convention as it applies to what's in that folder, and now it's updated. This image is 500 width, so I gave myself some a little bit more room. It looks like these images here we have 260, so if I wanted to bring it down a little bit, I could take this entire code. Let me just go Control C. I'll just paste it, hit space, and now you can see that with that 260 width to kind of keep unity across the board, it scaled it down a little bit. So you can take advantage of that. And then what I would do here is also, it looks like we're looking for these file names, right? Those are not in our images folder. So what I would do is I would go ahead and update it. So let me go ahead and update that to the images folder, not dots and images, but we need it to be called images, right? And all of a sudden, notice that they're all coming over. And now everything is back to square one. Now you can see the purpose of having your folder that contains all your images that are help building your layouts in web design is so crucial to have everything properly named, so when I open up these projects, everything comes across. What I'm going to do is now taking a look at this image here, the 4243. Notice that this is going the wrong direction in addition to the 4214. So I'm going to open up this one, the 4243 in Photoshop. 4243, there it is. What we can do here is really easily, I can just go to image rotation, and do a 90 clockwise. Boom. I'm going to go File, Save for Web. 60 on the JPEG, hit Save, and I will just hit Save, and we will replace. And back in Dreamweaver, we should be good to go. So I'm going to hit Save my HTML. I'm going to close it out. Reopen it. Let's give it some time to load them all in. And now you'll notice that that image is now updated correctly. So sometimes you have to close out your HTML pages and then reopen them. Okay, let's do the same here. The 4214. 4214. Okay. Rotation clockwise. That is the wrong way. That would be the counterclockwise. There we go. File, save for web. JPEG quality 60. Save, place. Let's go ahead and close. Let's go ahead and close this out. Reopen. Which this HTML page represents our index, right? Give it some time to load. And now, voila, we're good to go. So the next question we've got to ask ourselves is, how does all this apply to web design, right? Let's go back and just take a look real quick at the student project submission here. And we're noticing that inside this, what we would call a root folder, or this would also be called in web design our local directory folder, where we have all our HTML pages inside. We now have our images folder. We want to have an images folder in there where all our JPEGs and our images are located that link into our website, our HTML pages. But most commonly what we need to have is we need to have what's called an index page. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this. It actually already is, and just close it out. And we need to have what's called an index page. And I'm going to explain this a little bit further here. So I'm going to just delete the first part of this naming convention. I'm just going to have it be called index. This is fine. I still recommend changing The naming structure, we have no spaces, so I would rather just change this to meet. Maybe make it just called the meet page. Short naming convention and no spaces, no caps is web design because it will not be at risk of transfer process as it applies to FTP. And I'm going to show you FTP in here in a second using my own website. So I can still in Dreamweaver open these pages up now that I've renamed them there, and we have now an index page, and this is our landing page. And if I open it up, just because I named it there, notice that is now index.html. Everything still comes over. Everything is now corrected. All my images are now well balanced. They have unity. Everything's fixed, and these are all optimized for web, right? So perfect. That's exactly what we want for our viewers. Okay, so let's just kind of exit out of Dreamweaver for a little bit, and let's talk about why submitting work that follows these parameters is extremely crucial for learning before we jump into website publishing. Now, I have got another software that I use which allows me to do my web design. And it's called FileZilla. Now this is an FTP, which stands for File Transfer Protocol software that allows us to transfer files between our web server and our computers at home. We can use this as an external hard drive, and believe it or not, I have external hard drives, but at the same time, I also use my web server for transferring files. Not only this server, but I have done multiple websites, and I've used multiple servers for transferring files to my own colleagues. I have a freelance company that we work with. My own colleagues, and I've also used FTP for transferring files as it applies to other kind of freelance things in production. So my website, let me just keep this up and show you FileZilla. My website is, if you noticed under the course here, if we go to faculty info, you've got all my my information here. I've written this in, but there's a website listed as afdigitalart.com. Let me take you out to that one. Now this one I did not build in Dreamweaver. This one was built in using Wix. Okay. Now nowadays, all this modern technology we have with web design, it all has this really CSS driving force that allows us to do all this interactive animation and not have to do so much of the code anymore. Okay, as it applies to really even fundamentals, which is great. But another website I've done that you can review is, and this one was built when I started learning website design, fishyanimations.net. If you go out here, I also do animation. I do 3D computer animation, two-dimensional animation. You're allowed to come out here and look at some of my 3D work and motion graphic work I've done throughout my career. But if you notice, you come out here, this is a fully functional working website. It gives you information about me, a little bit of contact. Okay, it's got my logo, but I also not only own the .net, but I also own the .com. So you can buy multiple URLs to link into one web server. So if I go to .com, notice it is the exact same website as the .net. So they're the exact same, and I can link that URL into the .net. Looking further at this, if I am to, let me just close this out real quick and go back out to that website. When we first type it in and land, okay, we have fishyanimations.net, and if I put a / index.html, notice that that is the exact same page as the .com and the .net. Now what is this implying? Well, if we remember what I just talked about, the index.html, back when I was explaining here, is your main page that absolutely has to be named index.html as it corresponds to your website. You have to have an index.html, and you have to have it named that, and you have to have your landing page named that, because if you don't, once anybody goes out to your website, it's not going to bring it up. Regardless, if I was to type in fishyanimations.net, notice that the index does not appear, but that is the index.html, believe it or not. It just has the URL naming convention appear because I've purchased that web server. So how does this all work? Let me open up FileZilla again, and let's take a look here. So the host is fishyanimations.net. that is my main URL, right? .com links into that, but we also know the index page is located on that web server. Now I've purchased this through a web host, which we'll learn later. My username is Fishy Annie, and then the password, I can't tell you that because this is my own personal site, so I'm going to go and type that in. Enter. And I am now logged in to my web server. So let's break this down. If we go in, now here is what we call a root folder on that web server. It's called the public_HTML. I'm going to be explaining more about this later in the course in the final weeks, the video content that I've built for the course. This is our root folder that's on our web server. Now you can notice that I can use this web server for transferring files. I have some .movs on here when I do video production with a friend of mine. I can send him .movs. He can log in using my information and download them on his computer at his house. So it's an external transfer web hard drive. It's awesome. But as it applies to the website, I would go into the public HTML folder. So I'm going to go inside this folder, and we're going to open it up. Now, when I go inside this folder, we're on the server now, okay? We're inside this folder, and believe it or not, this is all the content that is building that website. Not only is the content that's building that website in here, but believe it or not, I have content that traces all the way back when I first started doing website design. And then over here on the left side, this is our local directory. If you remember, I told you about where our local directory would be. This would be our local directory. But this is also implying over here on this side all the other files that are on my computer. And I'm looking at the desktop right now of my computer, okay? So let's go back over, let's turn back over here and let's look at all the files on the web server. So if I'm looking, I got a bunch of HTML files, right? I got Fishy Animation 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, got all these. I've got some other HTMLs, which is called Home1, Home2, Home3, and believe it or not, I have my index.html. I also went ahead and made another one with a / and a 2.html. But this is, believe it or not, if you notice, I do have an index.html. This is the file, so when you buy web server space, this is the one HTML file you're going to have in there when you purchase it before all the other content comes transferring over. And that is the one file, again, that is going to be showing up when your users first go out to your website, okay? And that is what all this has to be built and named as is your index.html. There it is. Okay, looking further at this. Now, if you remember, we had to have an images folder, right? So inside this thing, this local directory here, we have an images folder. How does that correspond to web servers? Well, let's scroll on up. And you're going to notice I have an images folder. Okay, so I'm going to go inside my images folder, and I've been, let's see, going in here, okay? And you'll notice I got all my JPEGs in here, okay? And you're noticing that all these are images, but these are also portfolio works that I've created throughout my career that are the images that if a viewer or user was to click on, it would expand open and allow them to see them, because it understands, as it applies what we learned back in Dreamweaver here, the images folder, that's where these images are linking out of. But we can also use that folder for interactive animation. So any of these images in here, if clicked on the our website, it brings them up and allows the user or the viewer, your web user, to analyze and look at your portfolio, my portfolio in this case. So what's most interesting is this is my index page. Now, throughout the years when I've been doing website design, I've had multiple versions of my website. This is using some other software technology, most up to date, which we'll learn later in the course. But right now, I'm just kind of giving you some insight. I use Dreamweaver, but I don't use it as much anymore. I use other kind of web technology. But back in the day when I first started doing website design, believe it or not, on the web server, I have all the old versions of my website still saved, and all those pages are still saved underneath my root folder here, my public HTML folder. So if we look down, I've renamed them, not the index.html, but I've named them Home1, Home2, and Home3, which are previous versions of my landing page But by renaming them, keeping them active, I can have as many HTML pages. I can still go out to my old website because all the pages are still hosted. Hence, these are now the landing pages to reach out to all my old pages that are still all placed on my web server. So let's take a look at that. So I have home1.html. So which used to be index.html, I can change this to home1. And here we are. I got music going here. I've got some Jimmy Buffett stuff, right? This is I built in Flash when I first started website design. I'd have all Flash plugins and some scrolling, and you can go out and look at my statement and all my content. If I click home, whoops, let me go back. If I click home, notice it still reaches back to the index.html. So that's one version. If you remember, I had home 2. So let me go on out to home 2, right? Let's see what home 2 looks like. Okay, so this was another version of my website. So if I go to artist info, there it is, animations. Okay, same applies. Graphic design in this case is what I want to bring up because this would all apply to interactive animation as it applies to what we're learning about the images folder. So if I click, let's say, this PowerPay ad, I click that, it expands out and brings up a larger version of when I click in that area, right? This is interactive animation. This is called Lightbox. You can research that further on your own time if you want to see if you can expand your skills in software development. But if you notice, I get this little title, it pops up and hit close. Okay, but it's understanding to open this file. Now guess where this image is coming from, believe it or not. That's why your images folder is so crucial on your web server. So if I go up to the images folder now, you're noticing inside that images folder, there is a PowerPay add to JPEG and it understands that in that images folder, just like we learned back in Dreamweaver, where to link it out to for the interactive animation. This is why the images folder is so crucial as it applies to web design, because that is how the interactive animation is occurring and understands where to link it from when I click on it. Okay? So another thing really cool about FTP, that's what this is at any time if I wanted to update this image, let's say it was too big or so, because remember back in Photoshop how we optimized our images, let's say this image on the server was literally 31 something pixels wide by 4,000 pixels high, right? Well, let's say I wanted to overwrite that and optimize it. I could grab this file that's on there now. And if you notice, I'm on my desktop over here, and I could go into, let's say, the FileZilla folder on the local directory. I can take that file, click and drag and drop it over here, and it comes right off the server, just like a hard drive. And this is unlimited space. There's no terabyte limits. There's no gigabyte limits over here. I can use this as an external hard drive. I'm going to go in. I'm going to open up off my desktop now. What is it called? The FileZilla folder where I'm getting my files from. And if I open it up, there it is. If I open it up here and I go back and look at it back on my website, notice that it's the exact same height and width. Pretty impressive, huh? I can optimize it here if it wasn't optimized correctly, and then I can, if I was to optimize it using the Photoshop tricks I showed you previously, I can easily open up Photoshop and go ahead and open that that image in Photoshop, and then I could follow that process, save it for web. I could compress it down further. I could override it, and then vice versa. I can then take that image and then bring it back over onto the server, and it's going to say, would you like to override it using that target? Yes. And then the same applies to the website, where that image having the exact same file naming convention is already fully updated. So if I click on it, it would be optimized for web. So that's the bonus of having the images folder. You're able to get things done quickly without having to go through other web design software. So if I was to zip a file, the way I would do that is I'd select the folder that has all my HTML pages and of course my folder called images inside it, which would contain all the images that are have been optimized for your website. And I'd have all these inside my root folder, which is called, right now it's called this week 2 site. I would actually want to really name this accordingly as it applies to what this website's about. And you don't want spaces, and you probably don't want caps. So what I would do, I'm just going to name this dog website. Let's do a dash, okay? And that's good file convention naming for web design. Remember, this would be a local directory, but we need to submit it as an assignment. Once you get it named accordingly, I would you basically want to right click on it, and then you're going to go to send to compress zip. And once this happens, notice that it is compressing, and it's compressing all those images that are inside this folder. It's going to compress it all into a zip folder here. Got about 30 seconds remaining. It might take some time due to the amount of contents in there. And this is a good example of also showing you only really need to include the images that are optimized. You don't need to put all the images that you use to even capture for the website. Now, for certain projects, if it's required to photograph work and have the original works in there, then yes, okay, you would leave the original images in there. But really all you're going to need is you're going to need the images that have been optimized to build your website. So you don't need to put everything in there. All right, it's done. And then there's the zip file. Now if you notice, if we look over here, it is a WinRAR zip drive I have here. And then the size is 308,187 kilobytes, which roughly breaks into 30 megs. If we were to move that little point over, it's 30 megs. That's a perfect size for a website submission, even through email, just local email. If you need to, if they're still too large, for certain online classes, this will be fine. But you can also take advantage of using Dropbox. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I'll send files to my clients and my colleagues when I do this stuff, design, and I'll be able to actually indicate which folder I would like to share this folder with one of my colleagues using the Dropbox. So Dropbox is pretty good too, okay? And that's how you basically zip and compress files. In this case, a entire website or a local root directory here file, and you would submit this file for upload. Keep in mind that you can go to my LinkedIn page at linkedin.com if you would like to link up with me and have me as a resource and a reference in your list of contacts. You can send me a message at my LinkedIn, and that will reach out to my Yahoo email, hence my Gmail accounts, and I can always be there to help you. Thank you for watching, and look forward to working with you.